Senator Booker.
First of all, Mr. Chairman, I just want to correct for the record, they are not Jersey Turnpike barriers. They are Jersey barriers. It's very important that we get that right.
Correction will be noted.
I stand corrected.
I appreciate that very much, though. Can we pick up, Ms. Gupta, from where my friend Senator Tillis left off? So if you polled Black and brown communities that have high levels of crime, you can imagine the polls would say they want more police protection often, correct?
Yes, they want more police, they want fair policing.
Right. I ran a police department. I was a mayor of a city where the police department was under my command. And that was the case. People were, the biggest concern was their safety and their security. But you talk to the police in my department and the for the record, am I correct in saying the majority of the people that go to our jails and prisons, the overwhelming majority of people who are in prisons and jails today are people who are suffering from addiction, serious mental health challenges, addiction and serious mental health challenges. That accounts for the majority, correct?
That's correct.
As well as, and if you include survivors of sexual trauma, that's the majority of the female prison population as well, correct?
That's right.
And so when you are talking about the footprint, as a person who ran a cash-strapped city, when I was mayor of my city, I reduced my workforce 25%, including, unfortunately, having to lay off police officers. The reality is that most of us who are involved in the day-to-day driving down of crime, we had a lot of success in Newark, we know that our dollar for dollar would be better spent in lowering the demand, and my police officer would say this, if we had, like President Trump did in his executive order, by having co-responders, people that are specialized in mental health, specializes in addiction, specializes in homelessness, and specializes in sexual violence. Is that correct?
That's right. And in fact, I think that law enforcement are some of the biggest champions of that, and want to see that. It supports them. It helps them focus on violent crime and do their jobs in communities to keep us safe.
And actually, there's been data that shows dollars invested in that will lower crime more dramatically necessarily than maintaining the very expensive dollars we often spend. It's a lower cost option than the dollars we're spending in terms of reducing crime than we're necessarily spending on police.
I think that's right. The data shows that. I also think that's why you see such strong bipartisan coalitions. It's why I've been honored to work with members of this committee on these issues as well. I think it brings people together on this.
Well, forget partisanship. That's one of the reasons why you have such strong support, which I don't need to go through, from police organizations who understand that you're not trying to defund them. You're trying to actually make their jobs better. One of the reasons I couldn't run community policing efforts where the same police officers, you call it sector integrity, stay in the community to know that neighborhood. So one of the reasons I couldn't do that is because my police officers were too busy chasing the radio, often for calls that if we had the funding for it, other services could have provided, correct?
That's right, and you'll hear law enforcement talk all the time about how their community policing budgets have been slashed, in part because they're having to do all of this other kinds of enforcement that they wish there were other interventions for, absolutely.
One of my colleagues said you're soft on crime. Now, I don't care what your political perspective was. I have not met somebody in my years in the Senate who's come before this hearing, both sides, that none of us want more crime. We're all trying to find intelligent ways to drive crime down. Is that correct?
Yes. I will just say, Senator, my own grandmother was murdered and my family experienced homicide. Personally, it is, I have listened and heard and talked to crime victims every week that I was on the job at the Justice Department. To me, this is all about being able to deliver better public safety and to better keep our community safe.
And so I'd like to shift to the personal if I can. You and I are friends, correct?
Yes.
I'm surprised you admit that publicly, but I appreciate that. And I've been in a lot of personal conversations with you as you and I are struggling to advance bipartisan criminal justice reform, correct?
That's right.
Never in my time have I heard you in any way disparage members on the other side of the aisle in the private conversations. In fact, I've heard you often talk about the importance of building bridges and coalitions in order to get things done. In context of me, because I know you as a person of great kindness who, I've been very moved by how, even in the heat of some very difficult moments where you and I have had conversations, when we're really worried about people getting a lifetime appointment sometimes on judges you and I have talked about, where we believe that lifetime appointment might work against some of the basic fundamental rights and liberties, I still am remarked about that you do not diminish the humanity of folks, that you still seem to find a way to view them with equal dignity. And in light of my private conversations, I do wonder about what Twitter has done to our culture and the snarkiness it seems to breed. And you apologized here to the committee saying that you were contributing to an environment that, frankly, no side has a monopoly on. You come from a faith tradition that I also know. And I just wanted to, and maybe in the remaining minute I have left, can you talk to that just from your own work across the aisle to get real things done that have protected Americans, from your work across the aisle to help legislation pass through this committee, from my private conversations with you where you seem to fiercely adhere to the ideals of equal dignity? Could you help me maybe to just understand from your heart, put in context now, again, the tweets that have been brought up by a number of my colleagues?
Thank you, Senator Booker. The original impetus for me to engage in racial justice work and civil rights work was my own deep abiding faith. And I believe it brings a lot of us to the table on these issues. And I have always prized myself as somebody who sees the humanity in everyone and can bring people together who may not agree on 100 things, but agree very strongly on these 3 or 4. And to be able to recognize the importance of doing that bridge building. I think, to be honest with you, I do think that Twitter has been incredibly polarizing. I've played a role in it. I don't think it speaks well to my own desire to heal and build bridges and build consensus. I think it does reward snark and polarization. And I have, as I said, fallen prey to that. But my demonstrated record, I've been criticized by the organizations I worked in, by folks that I thought were allies for doing this bridge building work, for working across the political spectrum, and for engaging with people, understanding that all of us have a right to dignity, that there's a lot of work that we need to do to address some of the great problems facing all Americans, and that I don't have a monopoly on the truth or on the answer, but being able to roll up my sleeves, working with law enforcement, working across the political spectrum has been a defining feature of my career. And if I am confirmed as Associate Attorney General, you'll probably be happy to know I won't be tweeting in that way. But I look forward to not using that harsh rhetoric and to working constructively and productively, as I have done throughout my career, with members of this committee and with anyone who has business before the Justice Department. That will be my pledge.
Well, I will affirm that you have definitely been criticized by people on the left for your pushing and working to try to build the kind of coalitions necessary to pass legislation to get things done and to protect the American people. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Thanks, Senator Booker. We have 2 Democrats, Senators Padilla and